Zos hachaya asher tochlu. This is the animal that is permitted to be eaten. And with these words, we have in Parshat Shmini, chapter 11 of Vayikra, which is a massive chapter containing all the details of what we call Kashrut. What is kosher and what is treif? Although, just by the way, neither the word kosher or treif appear anywhere in this chapter. It's all about what is tameh and what is tahor. But this is generally referred to as kashrut, the dietary laws of the Jewish people, possibly one of the most famous hallmarks of Jewish life, affecting every Jewish person, every Jewish home and household, 24/7, are the laws of kashrut. And we find that in Parshat Shmini, we get all the core, not all, most of the core issues dealing with kashrut, which are the animals that can be eaten, can't be eaten, divides up into four categories: the animals, the fish, the birds, and the insects, all being dealt with in great detail. That while you're hearing it, it sounds a bit like a lesson in zoology. But actually, what's happening here is we're given a very, very highly detailed analysis of the features of the entire animal kingdom. But what is kashrut really all about? So if you ask different people, they'll tell you different things. And of course, for most people, kashrut is about hechsherim and rabbonim. Kashrut is about managing a kosher kitchen, a kosher household. Kashrut is about various different aspects of how to understand food production. For many people, of course, it's about profitability. There's a lot of money involved in kashrut. Everyone's got their different angle on kashrut. But let's go back to the sources this week, Parshat Shmini, and see what the Torah really sums up. What does the Torah really tell us that kashrut can really change our lives in a positive way? And interestingly, the Torah ends up with two key words. And these key words are familiar to us from different contexts. The first one is, at the end of the chapter 11, the Torah sums up by saying, V'hiskadishtem v'hiyisem kedoshim. By following the laws of kashrut, you can attain a level of kedusha, a level of personal sanctity. That's really what kashrut is about. It's about behaving and living in a way where we are connecting to something which is kadosh. As the Sforno here writes very, very beautifully, he says, by eating only kosher food, our bodies become able to receive the Or Eloki HaNitzchi, to be able to receive the light of the eternal God, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can connect to us and we can connect to him. But in some way, the body, the physical body, has to be made up of constituents, of physical molecules, so to speak, which have been created from only kosher food and not from treifa food. By eating non-kosher food, the Pasuk says, "V'nitmeisem bom," you'll become tomei. And Chazal darshan from the Tmeisem shop that on this Pasuk the word tomei is missing an aleph. So the Gemara says, "V'nitamtem bom," that actually you become a metumtam, you become stopped up, you become unable to grasp spiritual and finer moral and transcendental ideas, because somehow the body has been polluted. And this is really one of the beautiful areas of Jewish life. It's not just about buying in this shop instead of that shop and having these kalim and those kalim and separating this part of the kitchen from that part of the kitchen. It's about ultimately attaining kedusha. And the second word that is used here in this connection, the very closing pasuk 47 of chapter 11 in Vayikra, is lahavdil bein hatamei v'hatohar. That it's important to engage in an activity known as havdalah, to be able to distinguish, to be discerning, to understand, to use your mind and to use your intellect, to understand subtle differences in the world, in life, and in the food that you eat. And by doing that, that is part of the transformation. Interestingly, these two words sum up the whole of kashrut. At the same time, we are familiar with these two words, with every Shabbos and every Chag starts with Kiddush and ends with Havdalah. So Kiddush and Havdalah are two concepts which are intimately connected with each other. In order to create Kedusha, in order to welcome levels of sanctity and refinement and spirituality into our life, we need to have Havdalah, we need to know the boundaries. We need to know how to distinguish between things that look similar superficially, but actually at a deeper level come from a different source completely. And the Torah here is letting us into a very amazing secret, and that is certain foods come from a source of tum'ah, others come from a source of tahara. And if you wish to enter into a world of kedusha v'skadishtim v'yisem kedoshim, then you need to be able to make that distinction. The Rambam, in his Mishnah Torah, famously, in his amazing code of practice, 14 volumes of halacha, which spans the entire range of halachic practice, has got one book which he calls Kedusha. And half of that book, Kedusha, is about kashrus. And he calls it ma'achalot asurot, forbidden foods. But what's interesting is also how he starts and how he finishes. It's 17 chapters of the most detailed halachic material, going into every aspect of what we call kashrus. And it starts off with the following idea, which is quite amazing, which you don't get naturally out of Parshat Shmini. And that is, he says that in addition to the mitzvot lo taseh, in addition to the prohibitions and isurim, the restrictions about what we're not allowed to eat, Parshat Shmini also gives us 4 mitzvot aseh, 4 positive mitzvahs. And what are they? He says, lada'at. They are leda, to know the simanei kashrut. And he lists them in the Tariag mitzvahs. There is 4 separate mitzvot. One is to know the simanei kashrut of behemot and chayot. And what is a behemah and what is a chaya? To know the simanim. The other is to know the simanei kashrut of fish, and then to know the simanei kashrut of birds, and to know the simanei kashrut of insects. And this is, he says, a mitzvah aseh, a positive mitzvah of da'at, of knowledge. And this is not by chance. What the Rambam wants to tell us here at some level is that the way we transform the daily activity of eating, the way we transform it, is by using our da'at. What does that mean? That in essence, of course, eating is an activity we share with the animal world. And we could eat like animals. How do we eat in a way which is not animalistic? And the answer is, if our eating is connected to our da'at, to our understanding and our intellect and our knowledge, and we apply our knowledge to every mouthful of food, then we are already into a different world. We're not eating anymore as animals, we're eating in a way which is v'skadishtem v'hiyisem kedoshim. We're eating with kedusha. Kedusha means to separate ourselves from self-indulgence and animalistic way of life. That difference is the difference which makes us into Klal Yisrael. And here, interestingly, whereas the Torah often speaks about Yetzias Mitzrayim, Ani Hashem Elokeichem Asher Hotzeisi Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim. Here, uniquely, the Torah says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem Hama'ale Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim. That not only were we taken out of the negative situation of avdus and suffering and poverty of Mitzrayim, but also Hama'ale Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim. The objective of the Torah is to give us an ilui, to give us a hitromamut, to elevate our lives out of the animal world into the spiritual world, and this is done through the laws and the practices of kashrus, where we engage in both v'skadishtem and lahavdil, and these are both mitzvahs of the Torah of Shmini. And we don't. Of course, it's true on the practical level. Kashrus is about having these ingredients and not those ingredients, and buying from this shop and not from that shop. Of course, that's true on a practical level. But what's important is not to lose sight of the wood for the trees, not to lose sight of the ultimate goal of kashrus, which is to introduce kedusha into your life. I'd like to end with a little anecdote that happened to me about 20 years ago in London, as a rob of a community in Hendon. So it's Friday night, and there are hundreds of people in shul, and we're coming out of a shul, and there's a big noise, and I'm speaking to lots of people. All of a sudden, a young man in his 30s, 40s approaches me and starts speaking to me in Ivrit. And he says, Rebbe, he says, my life is falling to pieces. It's desperate. My business, my relationships. I need a bracha. So I thought to myself, I'm going to go to a tzaddik and get a bracha. So here I am. Please give me a bracha. All this is in Ivrit, of course. So I said to him, well, I know there are tzaddikim who give brachas, but I'm afraid to tell you, I'm not one of them. So I can't really give you a birkat tzaddik, but I can give you a birkat hedyot. I can wish you well. I can wish you that you should be successful and everything. And then I thought for a moment, and I said, this might be a moment in his life that his heart and his ears are open to hear something, I said to him, but I can give you something which is much better than a bracha. He said, oh yes, what's better than a bracha? He said, well, I can give you something which is better than any bracha that any human being can give you. What you need is not a bracha from a human being. What you need is birkat Hashem. That Hashem yiftach lachat otzaro hatov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you his shefa brachot min hashamayim. He said, okay, how does that work? I said, well, it's very simple. You've got to do a mitzvah. Really? He said, just do a mitzvah? I said, yes. You've got to take upon yourself a mitzvah, which you're currently not doing or not doing well, and resolve to do it now and do it well and for the future. And if you do that properly, Hashem yivarech otcha. You'll get a bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what mitzvahs are about. Really? He said, nobody ever told me that. Anyway, we had a little bit of a conversation. There were about another half a dozen people who wanted to speak to me. I said to him, look, I wish you all the very best. But he said, no, wait a minute. What mitzvah should I do? So there I am thinking to myself, what can I tell him? Tell him to wear tzitzis, tell him to keep Shabbos. All of a sudden I said to him, do you live locally? He said, yes. I said, okay, you live here locally in the middle of a Jewish community. Make a resolution in your mind and your heart. From now on, you're only eating kosher. You're only eating kosher. You're only shopping in the kosher shops. You're only eating in the kosher restaurants. You're going to look into kashrut, read a little bit about kashrut, get somebody into kasher your kitchen, eat only kosher from now on, and you will get a bracha min hashamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bless you. Anyhow, he thanked me very much, and he left, and I was busy with lots of 100 different things. About a year later, maybe a bit less than a year later, I met him, and he came to the shul just to speak to me, and he said to me, I just came to tell you, thank you so much for your advice. I'm eating kosher, he says. It's a bit expensive, but it's a new way of life for me. But Baruch Hashem, my whole life has turned around. The things are working much better now. Thank you very much. Now, I'm not saying to you that this is a foolproof a thing to do. Not every time will it work, but certainly kashrus is a type of mitzvah which can transform the lives of people. And many Baalei Tshuva, many people who have found their way back into Jewish life have found it back through kashrus. Through kashrus, we meet different people, we eat with different people, we can invite different people, our kids can invite different people, and that is really part also of this kadishtim, v'hiyisem kadoshim, with the exercise of our da'at, with the exercise of our knowledge, we're able to transform the activity of eating into an act of kedusha, and by doing so, we can develop those special qualities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us that we can become a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh v'chein yehi ratzon.